started now. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited to dive into this incredible call together. So a bit of background information on Greta. She is the founder of Beauty Scripts, which is the first digital monetization platform for beauty professionals. And she founded Beauty Scripts because she wanted to help professionals in the beauty space effectively leverage their expertise while also deepening their trust with their clients. She also attended the European School of Economics, where she studied sustainability in the fashion industry. Ultimately, the research she did for her dissertation in order to complete her master's in science led to the creation of the book called Wear No Evil: How to Change the World with Your Wardrobe. Wear No Evil is now a best-selling book, and it is such an honor to be learning from an industry expert today. So thank you, Greta, so much for taking the time to host this call. We know how valuable your time is, and we can't wait to learn from you.
Thanks, Hannah. So nice to be with you and everyone. I'm really excited to share my path and my journey. I want to disclaim that I am not a writing coach. So I noticed some of the questions that came through. I will definitely do my best to answer them, and we can open it up and have you all ask questions in real time too. But I think what I'll start with is just sharing my personal journey to becoming a published author. And hopefully along the way, you can gain some insight or some inspiration. And of course, if you have questions, I will answer to the best of my ability. So as mentioned, I am the author of Wear No Evil: How to Change the World with Your Wardrobe. And this book came out of my dissertation, which I think is a really good starting place. So I want to talk about where book ideas come from. And all of you have a book idea that's why you're on this call. Either maybe you've started writing or you're thinking about getting started on sharing something that's inside you that you want to bring into the world. And I think that that's a really good place to start. So for me, the knowledge that I acquired doing my dissertation on sustainability and fashion actually gave me a way of moving through the world where I could shop anywhere and still have it be aligned with my ethics. So just a little background on the book is basically sustainability and fashion was just coming into the limelight. There weren't that many books on the topic, and people really didn't know how to navigate the space, and they also didn't know how to navigate it and still be stylish. There was this sort of stigma that if you were going to have, eco fashion in your wardrobe, that it was frumpy and it was made of hemp and it was ill-fitting and it wasn't pretty. And that's kind of where eco fashion started, but we've come a really long way. And my book was, what I wanted it to be was a way for people to navigate the space and be sustainable, but also be stylish. And what happened was, the reason why, or how that turned into a book, is because of my dissertation and my expertise, my area of knowledge in the subject. I was just walking through life doing it, right? Like every time I went shopping, I was navigating that with that expertise. And what happened was, the people around me, friends and family, would say, hey, you know that not everyone knows how to do that. Like, what you're doing is actually special, and what you're doing is actually important, and people would want to know how to do that. And so that's where it sort of sparked the idea for me to turn it into a book and share it with a bigger audience, not just people who were in my life, and I'd say, oh, well, this is easy. You can navigate it this way based on that expertise. And the reason why I tell that story is because all of you have something like that in your life. You have some area of expertise or some passion that you've spent a lot of time and energy investing in, or a journey that you've been on. And those conversations, I just want to encourage you to pay attention to them, because those conversations that you're having are an indicator of what your book should be about, if you don't already know what your book should be about. Or it could be good affirmation that you're on the right track, because those are the conversations that keep coming up, people are interested in, and they want to know more. And that typically leads to a good book topic. So I wanted to share that first. And then I also wanted to say that I heard recently a statistic from the New York Times that 80% of Americans feel like they have a book inside them. And of that 80%, only 30% ever actually write the manuscript. And of that 30%, only 3% ever publish it. So I just want to commend all of you for being on this call, because it shows that you have that motivation, and it really is, you do have to work through the layers of getting your book published. It's super rewarding, and I'm hoping that this call will help you be among that 3%. So first thing we talked about is honing your idea, having those conversations, paying attention to what people are saying. The second would be they're sort of at the same place, but getting an agent and or creating, probably creating a pitch for that agent. So this isn't your book proposal. This is not a full-fledged thing, but this is an elevator pitch, right? It's something that you can say very quickly to someone, either in an email or a quick introduction that just gives them a taste of what your book is about and why it's important. So those are sort of the two things you want to lead with, like why it's relevant, why it coordinates with something that's popular right now. Because again, like with a book and a topic, your agent wants to see that there's an audience for it, that there's like a need for it. So honing those two things, making the message really quick and clear, and then also who it's for and why it's important. So I do remember, I'm trying to remember now, I did probably do like a one-pager that I could just like follow up send to an agent with that in mind. And, a nice picture that goes with it, a picture of yourself as the author is always a nice piece to include. And then what you do is you basically, so for me, and I know some of you all had questions about self-publishing. I don't know about self-publishing, so I'm not going to focus on that on this call. So I'm just going to focus on the traditional route because that was my experience. And hopefully you can find another resource. Actually, I can point you to a resource for someone for self-publishing. A friend of mine, her name is Jenny Carr. I think her website is jennycarrhealth.com. Self-published, amazing, enjoyed the experience so much. So you can definitely reach out to her and or ask me for an intro, and I'll introduce you and you can talk to her about the self-publishing. But the more traditional route is you want to be introduced to publishers and you want to be introduced to agents. So here is when you want to do your research, there's probably books that are similar or in the same genre of the book that you want to publish. So take that, those publishers, look at the inside cover or the back of the book, see what the publisher is, and then see, especially through LinkedIn and all of these social media platforms that we have, if you're connected to anyone or you're 1 degree away from someone who works at that publisher. And what I did is I just sort of made a list, right? Like you're probably like your top 10 publishers of who you think your book would be a good fit for, and who you think would be a good fit for you. And so after you've made that list, start reaching out to them. Sometimes you can do it directly. I had meetings directly with publishers. Although I will say ultimately what was most successful for me was having an agent. So again, here's your network coming in. Do you know other published authors? Do you know published authors who are sort of in your space? So, nonfiction versus fiction is a good indicator because a lot of times agents who do nonfiction don't do fiction and vice versa. So again, honing in on the right person in the right category for you as much as you can so that you have a more successful pitch with them. So once you do connect with your agent, and I went through many, right? I reached out to all kinds of people and I asked for all kinds of connections. And once you find your agent, you will know. Like for me, it was night and day. I met with some agents who were like, oh, this book will be great. You just have to change everything and make it this whole other book. And I was just like, wait a minute, why would I even write this book? And so then when I did meet my agent, she was like, this book is important. This is the time. She understood the fashion industry. She had experience in fashion. Fashion is the second most polluting industry behind petroleum because of how much we produce and the toxic processes around it. Like she actually really understood that, which was huge because then I wasn't necessarily having to educate her or get her on board with my idea, like she already sort of knew. So that's what I would say when you're looking for an agent. Not that they have to be an expert in what you are doing, but you definitely want to jive with them because they're going to go to bat for you with the publisher. They literally are your #1 advocate. So you want to make sure you're aligned with them. So I went through like 10 different agents and introductions and meetings before I found my agent and felt like, yes, I want to work with her. So then what happens is you'll sign with your agent and they will start the book proposal process with you. So again, I'm not totally sure where you all are in your process. And I guess what I might do is in the chat, do you guys want to just tell me if you have a proposal that you've already worked on? Like, do you have a working proposal or no proposal yet? And I can kind of get a sense of where you guys are. Okay, so far, no proposal. Yep, okay, honing ideas. Proposal, yes, no agent, not yet. Fiction, Okay, so I think I'll start, since no proposal yet, we'll just start there so that we cover all the bases for everyone. So, I mean, that's where I was. I didn't really have a proposal. So your agent will help you do that, though. That's the good news, is that's what they do. And so you don't have to stress about it. They'll give you the template of everything that needs to be included. And in my case, I actually hired a ghostwriter who helped me with my sample chapter, because my writing, since I had been in school for so long, was very academic and research-based, and it didn't quite have the tone of a mainstream book. So my agent felt very strongly that we would do better if I hired a writer to help with the tone for that sample chapter. So your book proposal will likely include, as I was saying before, why this book and why now. So that's sort of how you'll open your proposal, the importance of this topic, why you want to write it now, who you're writing it for, who the audience is, and you definitely want to categorize them and sort of how you're going to reach them. So, you know, for me in the eco, fashion, and beauty space, we talked about how it was a new sort of, you know, people cared about their food, where it came from. They were driving green cars. They were having green homes, and like fashion was the last frontier. But we already had this green, you know, like tree hugger audience that we could speak to. So again, you just sort of showing the different audiences that this book will apply to, and they want to see that. Then you have your sample chapter. Now your sample chapter is the most important piece, because it is a snippet of the book that you would be selling. So that sample chapter has to be the crux of the book. So if you, I mean, truly, like if people were going to just read one chapter in your book, which chapter would it be? Like, which would be the chapter that transformed them and their experience, and they came away different having read your book? That's the chapter you want to focus on. So the good news is, I mean, again, not sure where you guys are in your book writing. If you haven't yet started the book, and even if you have, you know, finding what that chapter is and really focusing on it is good news, because you don't have to have the whole book written to sell a book. In fact, I definitely didn't. I literally had a sample chapter and an outline, and all the other things that I talked about, the audience, who it's for, why it's important. The next piece that you want to have is the competitive titles. So again, looking at your top 10 publishers, that list of publishers that you would dream to be published with, and seeing which titles they were the publisher behind and which of those titles, those books, did well. You definitely want to align your book with one of their top selling books, so that they can see the potential. Oh, this book is like this book. Okay, that book did really well. Let's take a look at this. So again, just putting your best foot forward. And then the last piece of your proposal will be the marketing and the reach. And especially nowadays, because there's so many social media platforms, and publishers basically want to see, do you have an established audience? Are you on these, you know, platforms? Do you have a presence? are you engaging with this audience? It's a lot more likely, if you already have a blogging platform or whatever, or even a Twitter feed that's, popular and has a few thousand followers, they're much more likely to take you on as an author because they can see that you already have an audience that you could sell to, right? Because it's easy for you to then share a newsletter or a tweet or an Instagram post and say, hey guys, I'm really excited. I have this book coming out. I think it's going to be really helpful for you. I wrote it around this topic, which maybe you guys already are all very passionate about. And so it's much more likely that you will have those sales. So that's very attractive to them. It's not to say that you have to have that, though it is very, it does sort of swing the pendulum sometimes, I will say. And I think that I was lucky early in the game to have had a blog and a Twitter following and all of that I do think helped the publisher make that choice to go with me and publish my book. Okay, so I wonder, Hannah, at this point, can I ask people to ask questions in, like, with their, video instead of just the chat bar?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's more, but I just sort of figured I'd give you guys a chance to ask any questions right now at this point. Yes, and I do have the questions from when you signed up. I have them that I can pull up and read. Does anyone want to sort of raise their hand and do a live question right now, or should I just keep going with the other stuff?
Co had a question that she submitted to the chat a few minutes ago. Co, if you wanted to ask that.
Hi.
Hi, Co.
Hannah's hair looks fabulous, by the way. Hi. So I missed the beginning, so my apologies. And I know yours is more kind of research inspired and goes in the nonfiction category. But I'm wondering, like, what, even before the proposal, like, what did you say in those like introductory emails? Because I know, at least with some agents, they get so many submission ideas, and obviously they're always on the lookout for like great ideas and great people. But like, how did you get so many meetings at the beginning?
I think the good question. I think it was mostly working the network, right? So if you get so much further faster if you ask someone to make an introduction. That's why I suggested, and maybe you missed this part, Co, I suggest that you go into like your LinkedIn or even your Facebook, but LinkedIn because it's more professional, and see if you have like 1 degree of separation from that agent that you've started to do some research and you think that person might be the right person for you. Also asking other people who are published authors who their agent was, did they like them? A lot of times people will like who they worked with if they've had a successfully published book. And if you're in a similar category, they will be willing to say, yes, let me make an introduction. So I just feel like, and then I blind emailed. I think, again, it goes back to that pitch of why this book, why now? So you really make a case for like why this book is important and why now is the time to publish it. Because I think they feel that urgency, like they don't want to miss out on a book that could potentially be an amazing book. So you kind of like, you sort of have to put that pressure on and show them like, you don't want to miss this opportunity. This is a really special book and the time for this book is right now. So hopefully that answers that question. Any other questions before I keep moving?
Stephanie had a question in the chat. She says, has it been useful for revenue or more of a redirect to other products or services, as in like publishing a book?
Yeah, I think it depends. That's a really good question too, because a lot of times people, it's a really good question to be asking right now, which is like, why do you want to publish a book? Is it to be, what a book does for you is it creates authority. Once you're a published author, you really get to claim that you're an expert, especially for a nonfiction book. You get to claim that you're an expert in that area. So that can be like incredibly useful if you want to be building a brand and speaking engagements. If you have, other courses or webinars or things that you're going to be hosting. And again, you want to be seen as that leader. it's really such a good tool for that. I will say it's pretty rare that you have a book. I mean, I hate the scarcity mindset, but it's like most books do perform to a certain level, which is to service that level of you're an expert, you have a platform, you have a book that basically validates that. The next level up where you have, a book that's selling millions of copies for the first whatever years that it comes out is pretty rare. So it's less about the money. Like if I were you, if you're thinking about writing a book to make money, like it's the wrong reason. It's just not a guarantee in any way, shape, or form. If you're thinking about writing a book because there's a stirring inside you, something that you feel like you need to share, that you want to share, that is the right reason, as is, I see this as a tool to help me with my platform. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with the actual writing process. So what happened for me was I worked on this proposal. Oh my gosh, you guys, I worked on this proposal for like 3 or 4 months. And every time I gave it to my agent, she'd be like, yeah, but it's not quite there, because the truth is you only get one shot in front of these publishers. So it has to be as close to perfect, if not perfect. And I just remember, I'd send it to her, I'd do the tweaks, I'd take her notes, and then I'd send it back. And she just kept coming back being like, it's not there yet. And I do remember like my almost give up moment, which was like we were 3 or 4 months into this book proposal. It wasn't even the book, it was just the proposal. And I was like, I'm losing steam, like it's never going to be good enough. And I remember saying that to my boyfriend and just being, a little bit like on the crux of just quitting, for a minute. And he was like, it's just like, don't worry about it. Think about it tomorrow. And then the next day I got an email from my agent. She's like, we're ready to go. And I was like, hallelujah, we finally made it to that stage of the game. So then that happened pretty quickly. So once the proposal was right and she felt like it was right and the messaging and everything was good to go, she submitted it to our first tier of publishers, our top 10. And then we heard back and we had a couple of different offers, which is always great if you have a couple offers because you can sort of play them against each other. Again, that's your agent's job. They, if you have a good agent, like they're gonna know the fair market value of what you should be getting for your book as a first-time author, or an established author, or depending on where you are. And they'll also, they'll sort of help negotiate so that you do get the best rate for your book, especially if there are a couple of interested parties. So anyway, once we decided on our publisher, all the contracts, everything came over. Again, my agent is handling that. I don't have to hire an attorney or anything like that. That's all part of her wheelhouse, which is one of the reasons I really enjoyed working in the traditional route with an agent and a publisher. Is a lot of that stuff, that minutia, is taken care of, and it's part of how they run their business, so you don't have to worry about it. So anyway, once that was done, I signed a contract. They asked me, when do you think, I had a call with the editors who were going to be my editors working on the book at the publisher, got to know them a little bit. Then they said, okay, when do you think you can write this book by? And I actually very confidently said, I can write this book in 6 months. And that was because of my expertise, because I had just come out of school with all this research and a dissertation that I had defended on the topic. And so I was like living and breathing this information. So that was a fair estimate. I would always say, give yourself a little more time. If you, not like quite double it, but maybe like an extra month or two, just to give yourself a buffer. Because what happened was I actually went to Tokyo. I was able to go there with my boyfriend. He had a teaching assignment and I thought I was going to write. And of course I didn't. And so by the time I really got down to writing, I only had 3 months. But I knew I could make it happen. And how I did is just a very rigorous routine. And I think that that's the difference. I think, I can't remember the quote, but someone had said like the difference between a published author and a non-published author is just like your time in the seat. You literally have to block it into your calendar and keep your commitment and keep your date to go sit in your seat and write. Even if what you write that day is crap, because a lot of times it is, that's part of the process, and it really is a disciplined time of your life when you write a book. At least it was for me. And so I'll share my routine. Maybe it'll be inspiring to you. I literally made it up. It was something that just flowed out of me and felt really good. I know there are other resources now, like you can join, these different writing groups, which will help keep you guys accountable. If that's appealing to you, like that could be a really good way to do it. But for me personally, I basically had 2 whiteboards. And a lot of times people use whiteboards and Post-it notes. So I had 2 whiteboards. One whiteboard had the outline of my book. And obviously, since I've worked with my agent and I've done the book proposal, I literally have, I've sold this book. I've sold this outline. It's already there with the sample chapter already written. What happened to me was I actually, I'm a big meditator, and part of my practice is I get up in the morning, I meditate, and then I would write. And what happened to me was I did a download on the book, and what came out was a completely different book than the book I had sold. And I share that story just to let you know that that's okay. And I remember very timidly emailing my editor and saying to her, hey, I know we sold this book, but I just did a big thought download, and how it's flowing out of me, this is what came out. And they were different. And she was like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. Don't worry about it, keep going. So I just want to share that, and you have that reassurance that it's part of the creative process. And of course, check in with your editor, but a lot of times they're very supportive of what's coming out of you. So with my new outline on a whiteboard, I had the outline of the book, and then I had my second whiteboard, which basically was what I was currently working on. So I had sort of the roadmap, and I didn't write it in a linear way, chapter 1 and then chapter 2. And again, it's not a novel, so it's a nonfiction book, so you can sort of jump around. Everything comes together, but it's not necessarily a novel where you're going to be missing, some of the conversation or whatever from before that's coming in later. So I would just get up in the morning. Again, I would meditate, I'd eat breakfast. I wouldn't look at any news. I had no distractions. I really wanted to keep my mind very clear. And I got up very early just because that was what worked in my schedule. I'd get up at 6 o'clock and I'd be writing definitely by 7, maybe even by 6:30. And I would write for 2 to 3 hours. It really depended. Again, I had this due date, which I think for any of you who are inspired to start writing your book, set a due date and really honor it and keep yourself accountable, because it's so motivating, and you will actually get your book done instead of pushing it off again, oh, I'll do it later, because it really is the small things that you do every day that add up to a published book in this case. So I would write for 2 to 3 hours, and I would be using that whiteboard, the other one, not the outline, as okay, what am I going to work on today? What are the main points? And I would really do it from a place of what am I interested in writing about today? And I would jump sort of all over the place depending on what I was feeling inspired to write about. And that process worked really well for me because it ensured that when I was writing, even if I didn't feel like writing, at least I was writing about something that out of the whole list, I wanted to write about most. And it kind of kept me going, and it kept my head in the right space. So I would write for 2 to 3 hours, then I would take a break and usually have a snack and stuff. And I would do some more research. So especially with a nonfiction book, there's a lot of sort of research or updating statistics or just things that you might want to include. And I actually hired a research assistant, somebody that I knew from the industry who was interested in eco-fashion and had sort of the expertise that I needed. And I would just send her every day. I'd be like, hey, I need an updated statistic about this. Can you tell me like how many, you know, like what the CO2 emissions of the fashion industry are currently? I needed an updated statistic on that. Or, you know, can you reach out to such and such brand and get a quote from them? So it was still coming from me, but instead of me getting like bogged down in that minutia, I just handed it off to someone and then knew that the next day that was going to be in my inbox, and that it had been checked and cited and, you know, all the things so that it was correct data that I could use. So yes, so I would do research and then I would do something that I think is also really important is I would read other books that were in the similar space, and I would see out of those books like inspired me. Again, it could be information, it could be gathering that data for your book, and it could also just be like giving more context to the book that you're writing. So it may not be the exact subject, but maybe it's like a side subject that bumps against yours, and it sort of helped inform like a greater picture of the book that I was trying to write. So I spent time every day reading those kinds of books. And I didn't read them all the way through. Again, I would sort of pick and choose, like, what do I want to read? What am I working on right now? And then I would take the rest of the day off. So for me, I did get an advance for this book when I signed, which is what happens when you sign, you know, and you have a book traditionally published. And the idea behind that is that they are giving you money and so that you can take the time to go write your book and you don't have to work. Obviously, for some people, that may not be the case. But again, just carving out like, okay, from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., like I write. You will get your book done. For me, I was on an expedited path, especially since I now only had 3 months to write this book and I really wanted to hit my due date. I wanted to turn it in on time. So I would take the rest of the day off. I would go exercise, clear my mind, go for a hike, you know, just really try and let all of that like heavy concentration and focus go. And then in the evening, I developed a practice where I would read a book that was not necessarily at all related to my topic, but who the author's voice I really liked. Like I really liked the tone of their voice. I really liked how it felt when I read their book, the way they sort of structured their sentences, all that sort of thing. Like, you know, Liz Gilbert would be an example for sure. There were some of these different books or authors that I really appreciated their tone, and I wanted to develop a tone that was similar or be inspired by it. So I would read that at night so that it would help, you know, it'd sort of be in my brain for the next day when I woke up and I started to write. I could be inspired by them. And it was enjoyable, right? Like these were topics that were not necessarily related to what I was writing, but that I enjoyed reading. So that was my daily routine. And as I say, I did it for 3 months and I totally hit my deadline, which was amazing. And I was so happy to have been able to have done it. I don't really know, like if I reverse engineered it, if I was like, how many hours is it going to take me? I think I just was a little bit intuitively guided. And because I would get up early and I would write first thing, like it's such a good idea to write first thing because then the whole rest of the day can unfold and you've already got your writing in, instead of waiting at the end of the day and, you know, then something comes up or a friend invites you to a party or like whatever it is, and then you sacrifice your writing. So that was a good thing for me. And I think I also sort of set a bigger chunk of time aside to write in the beginning because I really wanted to get it done. So depending on where you are with it, you know, you could get really serious and write 2 to 3 hours a day, or you could write 20 minutes to an hour a day. Either way, you're going to get there as long as you actually do it pretty much every day. So I'm going to take a break there too to see if you guys have any questions about the process, or if you have anything that you've been doing in your writing process that you want to share. I know some people use Post-it notes so they can like move things around. I just had the whiteboards so I could erase things and you know, write something new, and that really worked well for me. But I want to open it up if you guys have any questions about that process or anything that you're thinking of for yourself that you want to share or that you've used that you also found has been helpful, because I want to make sure that the community is benefiting from this call. And you guys, I don't know, Hannah, I don't know how to do, well, I'm not running it, I'm just one of the participants, but if you want to allow people to, again, like come on and chat about it, like that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you should be able to unmute yourself and you can just go ahead and ask the question, or you can drop it in the chat box and I can read it out loud. Whatever works for you.
Thanks, Dom. I see your note. Glad you're getting value out of this. And then Co says there are tons of writer conferences and classes and workshops. That's true. Definitely, definitely true. Like another thing I know people do, and if I write another book, I might do it this way, is these like writing retreats where you go somewhere and they create the structure for you, right? And they also like provide your meals, your exercise, you know, activities and all those things. And so you basically just opt into this program, and then you can benefit from like that created structure for writing a book. So I think that would be a great resource. I also wanted to share with you guys a couple of resources. Like obviously I didn't use these because I just shared the process that I had, but there are a lot of writing coaches out there, and they will do one-on-one coaching. They'll also do group coaching. So if you wanted to, I mean, we could get a group of dreamers and doers together to do like a group coaching, which will be, you know, like a 6-month program or something like that. Again, to keep people held accountable and give them structure and help you sort of work through like some of the mind, you know, the blocks that you might get. So one coach that I will recommend is Azul Terrones. And I'm going to type it into the chat so you guys can see his website. It is coachazul.com. He is awesome, and he has a podcast, which again, I think is really, can be important to listen to, where he interviews other authors about their experience, their writing experience, because sometimes you know, just hearing someone else and how they did it, sometimes it's going to resonate with you, and sometimes, and that'll give you some inspiration. It'll be like, oh, I could do it that way. And so I think that's worth checking out too. So his podcast is called Born to Write. And so like when you're just, you know, driving around in your car or traveling or whatever, I recommend listening to his podcast to see how other writers are writing. And he actually does a wider variety, like from self-published to published to like first-time authors and 10-time authors and all that sort of thing. Okay, so Co says, should I organize another writer's retreat? Oh, have you done that? That sounds great. Also great to have beta readers too. Did you hire an editor? So I was given an editor from the publisher who was great. And actually, I should say, like, one of the perks of going the traditional route, again, like, it's up to you. You're going to have to decide which one feels like the right thing. To me, I did want to go the traditional route, and then everything sort of unfolded that way for me. But part of what you get with a traditional publisher is you get an editor, you get a designer who designs the layout of your book, your cover. Obviously, you have input and say on that. Then I had someone who was like my indexer, who created my whole index. Then I had legal support, where they made sure that all of the statements that we had put in the book were correct and true, so that legally we were safe to publish what I was publishing. It was just like, it was a whole team who combed through my book, and I'm so appreciative of them because they made the book so much better than I could have ever done on my own. So if you are thinking of self-publishing, I would definitely recommend hiring an editor. someone who can read through it. It's like their job, right? Like they're so good at it. They help you say what you're trying to say more clearly. And they just have that expertise that, especially if you're the one writing it, you're like so close to it, you can't always see it. So I would definitely recommend that. Okay, so the last piece that I want to share with you is getting ready to launch your book. So this is a piece that I learned, in hindsight. So I'm very happy to pass this along to you now, which is, in hindsight, I would have taken some percentage, and actually a fairly healthy percentage of that advance that I got, and I would have saved it. I would have reserved it for marketing and PR. So the book industry, the publishing industry is completely different than it used to be. And obviously I published my book in 2014, so it's like 5 years ago, but even at that point, it was starting to change, where a publisher before used to like pull out the bells and whistles. They had this whole like PR budget. You would be on all these different TV shows. You would have coverage in national magazines. Like they literally put so much into the publicity of their books. But with social media and, well, online media in general, like they really don't have that budget anymore, and times are changing. So I would say, and it's up to you, is essentially what it is, So I was a little naive. I still sort of believed in the old way that publishers worked. I had a little bit of cautioning, but not so much. I think it was right at that point where people were like, oh yeah, this is changing. Today, it's definitely different. I have another friend, an author friend, who her books have done incredibly well, and she did take a huge percentage of her advance and she put it towards PR. And you want to do this early on. So if you can find either a person, but I would say probably, it depends, but an agency is best because just the connections. And again, you probably want someone like in New York City, who's just like top of their game. They have all the right connections, and you want to budget to pay someone probably 3, maybe 6 months, but definitely 3 months out from your book launch, because you only get one chance for your book to be like released. And it's a very short window. Like there's hype before it's launched, right when it's launched, and then right after. And then after that, every now and again, like because my book is relevant to eco fashion, I get called in for features on Earth Day sometimes, that sort of thing. But like there was never as much momentum around my book as right when it comes out. And so just capitalize on that. Like you're not going to have that PR marketing budget the whole, like forever, but like really plan for it right before, during, and right after your book launch. And you'll go so much further faster. It's just one of those things where, it takes money to make money, is a saying. And in this case, I really think it's true. Like set that money aside, put it towards your book, and your book will perform so much better. You will make that money back in your book sales. But without it, like you're going to do your best and you're going to reach out to your networks and you're going to ask them to share it, but like it's just not going to be the same as if a professional is helping you market and get it in front of people. Okay, so I'm reading in the comments. Do you have a step-by-step how to get started Cliff Notes for those who couldn't take notes? Well, I have notes here. I basically, I would say number one, hone your idea, having it come through conversations. What are people responding to that you're talking about? What are they interested in that you have an expertise or a point of view on that is worth sharing, and that more and more people around you are interested in, and you can sort of tell, like, is that point of value that you're offering. The next is to sort of like write a pre-proposal. So this is a book proposal for your agent. You want to highlight who you are, what the book is about, and why it's important. The next thing is getting in front of those agents, signing your agent, finding the right one for you. And then with your agent, you'll craft your book proposal, which they will guide you through the whole process. And noting that the sample chapter is the crux chapter that you really want to make sure represents the book. And if your audience only read that one chapter, that they would be getting the most value out of your book if they just read that one chapter. That's the sample chapter you want to focus on and pitch. And then the writing process for me, it was just having that structure every day, getting up in the morning, using the 2 whiteboards, one whiteboard with the outline, one whiteboard with like what I'm working on today, and being able to like erase, you know, like I think sometimes when you like type things out, it just feels so sort of like final. But for me, a whiteboard felt really like, oh yeah, I can just erase that and I can make a new idea. It was very fluid for me. So I just encourage you to find whatever that is for you. Like I say, sometimes it's Post-it notes for people, or those big like white sheets of paper, and maybe you're gonna make a whole thing on your wall. Like I actually did have, you know, some of those on my wall sort of in chronological order as the book started to come together more. So whatever it looks like for you to just visually map it out, take as much space as you need. My whole bedroom was just like transformed into my writing studio. And then, so do your daily routine, get a research assistant if you need one, join a coaching, you know, a writing coaching program or a retreat if you need one. And it's kind of a fun time to explore that. I mean, I think that's the other thing, like, honestly, when I was writing my book, it was one of the happiest times of my life. I think it's because I really thrive on structure. So having that like routine felt really good. I was feeling really productive. But it was just like, enjoy the process. You know, I think sometimes we get, especially with the odds of writing a book and having it published being what they are, you know, it's easy to feel pressure, and it's easy to feel, you know, like that you've got to get through this thing. And I just would encourage you to enjoy it, to really make it work for you, and let it be a process, instead of, you know, of course you're moving towards a result, but really enjoy the process along the way. And then the last piece would be, you know, when you sell your book to the publisher, just be really clear with them and really know and they may not tell you truthfully. So I would just say, like, set aside your own money for marketing and PR, because these publishers just don't have the budgets that they used to support you in that way. Okay, I think that is it. And then this, Gabriella says, what was your sample chapter? Okay, so for my book, what I had developed sort of unknowingly that I was like walking through the world with was this methodology to shop anywhere, and still be able to buy things that were in alignment with my ethics and my ethos, my morals, sustainably, as well as stylish. And so we called that the integrity index. And my sample chapter was like, hey, I figured out this way that no matter where you are, you can shop and it can still be eco. Here's how. And that was my sample chapter, because that really is the crux of the whole book. And then I had, you know, some like other chapters around it that sort of led up to like why this is important, that the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry behind petroleum, and like that's having an impact. And that sort of was like leading into it, like, why should we care about this? How do we navigate it? And then a lot of style advice on how to dress for your body type, and just keeping style part of the conversation, because a lot of times sustainability and style, they seem like they're mutually exclusive. So I really wanted to create a book that gave the reader both of those things. And then my final chapter was on clean beauty, so that they could, in another area of their life that's related to fashion, also be clean and green. So do you guys, I was gonna say, should I just go through these questions? Unless anyone has a question they want to ask right now, I might just go through the questions that that you all posted earlier, and I can just like quickly answer them. But if anyone has a question now that they want to ask, I'll let you. I guess the best way is unmute yourself and you can ask the question, or you can type it in the chat.
Yeah, you can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat, and then we can read it for you, whichever you prefer. And by the way, this call will be recorded and shared in the offers group, so that way you can reference any part that you want to go back and check out later.
Okay, I'm going to read these questions. We just have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly. So the first question is getting a publisher when you have draft 1 completed and a concept for a series of 4 books and getting paid. I mean, having your draft 1 completed is awesome. Having a concept for a series is awesome. Like a publisher, definitely, it's very attractive to them if they can see, like, not only are they publishing this book, but that you have some follow-on books that are going to come with it. It is very attractive, so I would definitely include that. Getting paid, I mean, if you're with a publisher, you will get a advance when you sign with them up front. So you'll get a certain amount of money, again, that will help you create space and time to work on your book. Other people don't need that. I know one of my author friends made a down payment on her house because of her advance, which was great. So it sort of depends on where you are and the sort of time and support you need. The next question, when, how to get started on looking for a publisher to start advertising the book. So, I mean, I would say if you have your idea fleshed out, you don't have to have the whole book written out, but if you have your idea fleshed out and you can answer those 2 questions of like, why this book and why now, and you can answer them, you know, like confidently and even maybe with some data behind it that really will motivate the publisher to take a look at it, that would be my advice. To start advertising the book, I would say like the lead time for traditional print press is at least 3 months. So that's why I was saying with your PR budget, your marketing budget, you want to budget, you know, 3 to 6 months before your book comes out. And typically what happens is when you turn your book into the publisher, they do all their sort of like combing through it, excuse me, making sure that it's ready to go to press, to print. So you sort of have some time where you're like done writing, you've handed off by like that point, you really don't even want to see it anymore because you're so like tired of it. But they're still working on it. And so you sort of have like some time that opens up and some energy and some space to then start advertising and marketing it. And I would work with either a PR agency or a person, you know, an individual that you know who is really connected in your categories, your industry, to start pushing it out there so that you can get some of that long lead press, which is the more traditional in print magazine form. And then obviously you can get some different TV spots. Like I went on to the news in New York. I was living in New York at the time. I went on to the news, and especially because around Earth Day, and we timed that my book was coming out around Earth Day. So they had all these sort of like how to be green, and we did a little mini fashion show at the studio. And, you know, so it's just those kinds of things. They do take a little bit more planning ahead of time. And you really don't want to miss them. You really want to make sure that you capitalize on like your book is launching. This is the time to spread the news. The next question, how much of the book should be done when you start pitching? So again, for me, like I didn't really even have any of the book done. I just knew that like this idea kept coming up, that people were interested in it, and they were basically asking for a book, you know? So as long as you have a clearly formed idea and or a point of view or expertise that you know you're going to be bringing to the table, you can start with that. Some people might feel better if they have something a little more fleshed out. You can start working on that sample chapter, like what is that chapter that you really want to share with the world? And that'll probably help give you some clarity to have those conversations when you're pitching to your agent. And then your agent will obviously help you with the pitch to your publisher. So working on a book proposal and a rough draft. Okay, so just keep doing it. You know, like I say, just you've got to get your butt in the seat, and that's how you become a real writer. That's the difference between people who say they want to write a book and people who do write a book. So just keep at it, and there will be many drafts. Like, just be gentle with yourself through the process, and ask for feedback when you're ready. Again, like you don't have to share it with anyone. I don't think I shared my book proposal with anyone other than my editorial team, because I was like, it's no one else's business right now. Like, I just want to work on this with my team who knows like this, what we're doing is writing a book. So it depends on sort of your process. We talked about book proposals, taking a book from concept to getting published. again, it's just honing like that idea and making sure it's really clear why this book, why now, who your audience is. These are the things that publishers want to know. And then for me, getting an agent was key. I mean, they just help you navigate the space so quickly, so smoothly. You can, I mean, I tried to go straight to the publisher, which I think is fine, but like an agent, and you kind of, you do pay an agent a fee, or at least they take a cut of your advance or whatever, however you guys structure it. But for me, it was worth it because they're so involved and they're part of the process and they have your back in a way that, that not many other people do. And I just really, I wanted that. So I kind of knew that that was the path that I wanted to go down. How to self-publish. So I don't know much about that. Like I say, my friend Jenny Carr, I think her website is thehealthyeatingkid.com. She did a whole course with a group that did, self-publishing their books. It was incredibly successful for her. So I would just sort of look for other people who who have self-published and maybe just reach out to them and ask them. I'm sure they would share. And then the journey to see if it could be an opportunity for me. Cool. Yeah. And again, just enjoy the process and explore it. Not to say that writing is like all rainbows and unicorns the whole time. It's hard work. It can be, but I think, if you have determination and you want to meet this end goal, you will. So I would just, just stick with it and be gentle on yourself for the days that don't feel good, and really celebrate the days that it really does feel good, when you're in flow and you're just writing and it feels awesome. And then the last question, I'm writing a novel, so curious about your personal journey to publishing. So, and again, like with a novel, that's a different book. And I do think you have to have the manuscript finished before you would pitch that to a publisher for a novel versus a nonfiction book. But again, find the right agent and they'll help you with that. That may not even be true anymore. I'm not sure. So I don't actually know enough about that to advise you. And that was our last question. So unless, you guys have anything else, one last question. Hopefully this is helpful. And you guys can always reach out to me if you have follow-up questions, things that come up that you want to ask about. I'm happy to weigh in with what I know and if I can be helpful.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Good. I'm so glad. And like I say, just keep doing it, you guys. When I was younger, I wanted to publish a book. I love to read, and I actually really love to read self-help books and nonfiction. And I think I just sort of said, haphazardly, I'd love to have a book one day. And it's one of the greatest accomplishments of my life so far. I'm really so glad that I did it and that I had the support to do it. And you guys can do it too. It literally is just a matter of, sticking to it, being determined to do it. You will find a way, whatever way is the right way for you. Thank you, everyone. It was really nice to be with you too. Thanks for all the sweet comments, and I'm glad that it was helpful.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in.
All right. Bye. Thanks, Hannah.